All right, so get started.
Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I suppose for those of you who don't know us, we should probably introduce ourselves. My name is Adam Froerer, and I work with Elliott. We work for the solution-focused universe. I do a lot of research that Elliott thinks is stupid, but nonetheless, he lets me do it anyway. And we just have a lot of fun together.
We do. We do. That is absolute truth. And I am Elliott Connie, and I am Adam's colleague, and we've been working together now for about 11 years. And that work journey has led to us describing our work, I would say, for the last year and a half.
David?
What are you doing, Anna? And if you guys don't know Anna, I'm sure she just turned really bright colors of red. She would not enjoy that she left mute on or off. But so for the past year and a half, I would say we've been describing our work as being associated with something called the solution-focused diamond. And that's what we're going to talk to you guys about today. And it's a fairly small, intimate group. So Adam, how about we just have an informal conversation as opposed to like a PowerPoint and all that kind of jazz, because that's boring and I don't like being boring.
Okay.
So the first question that we would have is, how many of you guys have heard us talk about what we now refer to as the diamond before? None of you?
No, Andrea, Rob.
All right. So
Shell,
Adam, can you pull up the solution-focused diamond?
Well, I can, but you're the host, so you'll have to also do something about that. But it'll take me a minute, because I thought you were going to do it, because, again, you're the host.
There you go. And if you could, can you put the Google Drive link in there?
Maybe.
Put it in the chat so people can see it. So, well, first let me tell you how we developed this idea, because it actually happened quite organically. We were not interested in creating something like this. It literally happened organically, and it happened, here it is, and it happened during a visit to Essex, UK, actually, is where the culmination of this happened. So here is the diagram, and you can see why we refer to it as a diamond. And Adam's going to put the link in the chat. You guys can download it so you can have it, because once you understand that this functions as a bit of a solution-focused navigation system. So when we learned solution-focused therapy, one of the things that was a real struggle was, or at least a real struggle for us, was if you studied with Chris Iveson, you get one explanation of solution-focused brief therapy. And then if you listen to Yvonne Dolan, you get a completely different explanation of solution-focused brief therapy. And then if you listen to Adam, who was prominent at the time, Bill O'Hanlon, all these people. And it was really, really confusing, because we were both like, so how do you do this work? In essence, one of the most important questions you can ask yourself is, how do you know which question to ask and when? Right? So how do you know how to build questions, and how do you know which question to ask? At the time, I just had like a collection of solution-focused ideas in my head, like scaling question and miracle question and exception questions. It's just like, so how do I know which one of these to use in a conversation? And it was a serious frustration point. And then I went to brief, and I remember being really pissed when I went to brief. You guys know the guys at brief are my boys. Don't tell them I said that. Everybody in here, you have to like swear secrecy, or Adam and I are going to come over there and get violent. So shh, be secretive, right? So then I went to brief, and I was like, I'm going to go to London and I'm going to learn how to do the brief approach. Because at least then I was thinking, like, these guys are going to tell me how to do it. And one of the first things I observed was an argument between Chris and Harvey about Harvey always asks the miracle question and Chris not so much. And I was like, damn it. I came to London to learn a brief approach, and even the three brief guys don't do it the same. So that same year, or maybe the next year, I met Adam in Malmo, Sweden. I think I went to brief for the first time in 2009. I met Adam in 2010. Adam, can you believe it's 11 years since we've been hanging out?
Nope.
You've got like a whole new child since we met. When we met, you only had 2 kids. You got like a whole new seed since we met. So I met Adam, and we went for a walk at a conference in Malmo and realized we both had the same point of, I don't know if frustration is the right word, but we both had the same point of confusion, and we both wanted to do something about it. So for years, we started observing therapy and try to like figure out the differences between the different way people did therapy. And there were therapy sessions that were published, and we would get access to them. We would watch them and pay attention to how so-and-so was doing such and such, and how, whichever person was doing whichever. And then I don't know who said it first, if it was Adam or me, I really don't remember. But eventually, instead of looking for what's different, we started looking for what's the same. We started looking for what's similar. And I don't think there's a human being on the planet Earth. Did you guys watch Adam's microanalysis workshop not too long ago? So you probably have noticed Adam is like a therapy super nerd. And I don't think anyone has observed more therapy with a more powerful microscope than Adam. So for years, we start watching therapy to figure out what's the same. And we realized, and we were really interested in, like, what is solution focus? Like, what is that? And we realized that no matter who you were watching, solution focused brief therapy always included 3 components. An outcome the client is hoping to achieve.
Did we use all the skewers?
Whoops. Adam, when I saw the name Becca, I thought that was your wife, like kind of just peeking in, but it's not.
Oh, but I hope she's going to use skewers for something
Delicious.
Mm-hmm.
So we noticed that in solution-focused sessions, they always had 3 components. One was a focus on the outcome the client is hoping to achieve. 2 is the facilitation of a description of the presence of that outcome. And 3 is an ending that honors client autonomy. So it didn't seem to matter whether I was watching Chris Iveson, Evan George, Harvey Ratner, Yvonne Dolan. It didn't seem to matter who we were watching. They might have done it differently, but they were all doing those 3 things. A focus on an outcome. There you go. A focus on an outcome, the facilitation of a description of that outcome, and then a closing that honored client autonomy, right? So, and for us, that was like a groundbreaking thing. Like, we were just kind of nerding out. Adam and I, we've never lived in the same city together, but we would talk once a week. We'd have a meeting once a week for an hour. And then after about a year of that, we realized an hour wasn't long enough. So we elongated the meeting to 2 hours. And for us, this was like a huge groundbreaking moment that no one seemed to agree was a groundbreaking moment. Or no one knew that we were having this groundbreaking moment, that like all solution-focused brief therapists are doing these 3 things. So Adam, before I go and talk about the actual diamond, do you have anything you want to add to that part of the process?
No, I think you got it right. I think the only thing I said no, and now I'm going to say something. Just ignore that I said no. I think that what I would say is, when you read Steve and Insu and Eve Lipchick and all of those people who are working, one of the things that they repeatedly say is this approach was built by watching it, by watching what happened, by observing it, and then trying to figure out what was working and then do more of that approach. And I think we tried to take a very similar approach when looking at this and watching all these sessions, is really just watching what they were all doing, trying to figure out what they were doing. And so I think what I would say is we weren't, I don't think that we have necessarily changed what the approach is. We're just trying to give a good description of what we've noticed.
Right. And then I think one of the things we've noticed, because there's been a lot, I'm sure you guys either know or have heard, there's been a lot of like infighting in the solution focused world over the 15 years that I've been a part of this community, of the people who do it differently try to figure out who does it right. And I think what Adam and I would like to say is like, everyone does it right. Just people do it differently. And this diagram helps explain it. Adam, can you pull the diagram up again?
Yes, sir.
So what happened in Essex and how this came to be is people will watch me do therapy and they like try to do it like me, or they'll watch Chris and they'll try to do it like Chris, or they'll watch Insue and they'll try to do it like Insue. And a lot of people try to figure out like, so what's the right way to do it? And the truth is there is no right way to do it. So I started drawing on the board, like, here's what I mean when I say there is no right way to do it. The Harvey-Ratner pathway of doing solution-focused brief therapy is to start at the desired outcome, and then he goes to a scaling question, and he uses scaling to facilitate a description, and then he goes to a closing. The way that Chris will most commonly do solution-focused brief therapy, and by the way, we discovered this by watching copious amounts of these people doing therapy. So Chris will do desired outcome, preferred future, closing. Evan will typically do desired outcome, resource talk, preferred future description, scaling, closing. I will typically do desired outcome, resource talk, preferred future description, closing. So it became clear to us, like, wow, no one's doing it right or wrong. We're all just doing it the way that we do it. It's just like, and I've heard people use this metaphor before, but it's like speaking English with an accent. Like Anna Francis, she speaks English with a New Zealand accent. So does Andrea, by the way. They sound like Kiwis. So, but they're still speaking English. So they're not speaking English wrong. They're just speaking it with their Kiwi accent. Rob speaks with a very British accent. He's not speaking English wrong. He's just speaking it with his very British accent. Adam speaks with an American accent. Adam actually is like his accentless because he's lived all over the U.S. But that's how like language evolves. Well, Harvey speaks with a scaling accent, right? If that makes sense. Chris speaks with a preferred future accent. So we began to understand solution-focused brief therapy differently. And as I drew this diagram on the board, I was teaching a group, and I was showing them, like, this is the pathway so-and-so takes, and this is the pathway so-and-so takes. And it all culminates in ending the session in a way that honors client autonomy. And it looked like a diamond. And someone in the audience said, that looks like a diamond. And sure enough, like, that became what we refer to as a solution-focused diamond. And we hope that this process kind of pulls the community together, because we think you can find every solution-focused therapist on this diagram, because this is the way that people speak solution-focused questions. So Adam, what do you want to add?
I think you did a beautiful job describing it. I think that what I would say is, one of the things that also led to this diamond is that Elliott and I both had, I guess I would say, complaints about phrases that people would use in the solution-focused community that we didn't know what they meant, right? So oftentimes we would hear people say things like, you an SFBT therapist leads from one step behind, or the therapist's job is to tap the client on the shoulder. And we would regularly say, what does that mean? How do you even do that? And so one of the things that kind of led to this exploration and trying to discover is that we really just wanted to know, like, what does it look like? How do you actually do it? What's the job that you do? And I think that that this diamond hopefully removes the need for some of those phrases that we don't have clarity about what they mean. I think when we think about that gray bar down the left side of the page, where you get a desired outcome and then you describe that desired outcome, it makes really clear what our job is. Our entire job is to have a conversation about what the client wants. And then those blue circles give us the modalities of which we can use to have that kind of conversation. We could talk to them about how they do what they do, right? The resources. How do you know you're the kind of person who's capable of that desired outcome? We could have a conversation around, if that desired outcome showed up, what would it look like? We can have a conversation about, when in your life have you had the desired outcome before? And so I think really what this does is it helps us to utilize the solution-focused language without those phrases that don't really mean that much.
Makes sense? Now, another reason why we think this diagram is so important is, how many of you guys have ever been stuck in a therapy session where it's like, I don't know what to do next. Like, I don't know what I should be asking or where I should be taking the session. Like, how many of you guys have ever experienced that when you're using this approach? The most common reason, and by the way, my hand's up too, the most common reason that we experience that is we've gotten lost in the forest. Like we got lost somewhere in the words. And that makes sense, right? If I ask a client, what are your best hopes from our talking? And let me tell you how smoothly and how easily it is that we get ourselves stuck. And again, no judgment. I'm there too. So we ask a client, what are your best hopes from our talking? And the client says, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to answer that question. I'm so frustrated and sad and struggling. I just want things to go the way they used to be. And now in your head, you're like, ooh, did they answer my question about the desired outcome? Since they mentioned they want things to go back to the way they used to be, should I start asking about exceptions? So what Adam and I realized is, if you can prevent yourselves from getting lost, then you're much more likely to always be on track in the session. And Adam started saying something in our teaching. He would say it constantly. He'd say it all the time. And Adam started saying, you have to know where you are in the session at any moment. Like Adam would say, I should be able to pause the session and ask you, where are you in the session? And you should be able to say, I'm trying to get an outcome, I'm doing a description, or I'm wrapping up the session in a way that honors client autonomy. And a lot of people really struggle with that. And we hope this diagram will help people to stay on track more. So Adam, say a little bit about that, like why you thought it was so important that therapists should always know where they are in the session and what they're doing.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that led to that is I listened to the guys at Brief, Chris and Evan, and they would teach what they called the diploma course, right? So they would teach a course where they were really trying to help people master solution-focused brief therapy. And one of the things that they noticed when people were struggling with solution-focused brief therapy is that they noticed that it wasn't necessarily what we would typically call the techniques, right? People could ask the best hopes question. People could ask the miracle question. People could ask scaling questions. They had mastered the techniques of solution-focused. But one of the things that they started to notice is, and they would ask people to record themselves doing therapy and then transcribe the recording. And then they would submit that as a demonstration that they were becoming proficient in solution-focused brief therapy. And one of the things that they noticed about people who tended to struggle is that they would listen to what the client said. They would listen really, really carefully. And they would pick up, like oftentimes the client would say one sentence or two sentences or even a paragraph, right? It didn't matter how long the client spoke. People who struggled tended to pick up the last thing that the client said. And they would ask a very solution-focused question about the last piece of what the client said. And what ended up happening as they would do that is that they would just kind of meander around. There was a lack of continuity in the session. And so we started thinking, how do you help people to navigate that process? If they're not supposed to pick up the last thing that clients say, how do you help them to identify what part of what the client says they're supposed to pick up, right? Because we all know that this is an approach that's based on language. This is an approach that should utilize the client's language. And so we started thinking, how do we help people recognize which part of what the client says they should pick up? And this is where that diamond, that three-step process really comes in useful, is that if we know that our job is to get a description of the desired outcome, then the part that we should be picking up in anything that the client says is the part that's connected to their desired outcome. When has that outcome been present? If it's present again, what will you notice? Who else would notice that your desired outcome is present, right? And so the desired outcome became an anchor that we should see in a solution-focused session over and over and over. And oftentimes, people say, well, what happens if the client doesn't answer your question? Or what happens if they say, I don't know, or right? And knowing that the desired outcome can be an anchor, then when the client says, I don't know, all I need to do is go back to the last time they said something about their desired outcome and ask about it. If somebody goes on a really long tangent and they say, yeah, that thing happens once last week, but then let me tell you about all the 6 other days where it didn't happen, right? Knowing that the desired outcome is where we're anchored to helps us to overlook or to kind of step by the 6 days and orient back to the 1 day and say, can you tell me about the 1 day that the desired outcome was present? And so we should know where we are in the session, because if we don't have a desired outcome, we can't do anything else. If we have a desired outcome, we should know that we're now going to describe it with as much detail as possible. When we know that we are in the preferred future, then we know that we should ask questions that are consistent with the desired outcome is going to show up. If we're in the history of the outcome, then we know we're talking about way back when you had this outcome before at its very best, what was different, right? So if you know that the desired outcome is an anchor, it also helps you to know, where am I in the session, and therefore what's my job? And therefore it helps us to orient to what part of what the client says should I be paying attention to.
So, Adam, how about we open it up for thoughts or questions and just have a discussion about it now that we've laid it out a bit.
Okay. So what thoughts or questions do you have?
I'll let you be the professor and call on people.
I'll speak up from Michelle from Australia. It's lovely to see. I had only just sort of seen the beginnings of this, so I haven't actually delved into your diamond. But even just looking at the picture, it makes it so much more simplistic. And I've just had a team that's been trained by Chris, and some have previously had Michael Durant train them, in years gone by. And then I have a different approach. I supervise them. So to actually take this to them I think will help clarify. I've had 2 or 3 of them say, but everyone does it so differently, the different people that have taught me. So this will be I think it'll be instrumental in building their confidence in using it. And they want a script, and I've been reluctant to give them the script. And we watch lots of Elliott's and your videos, so in our supervision and coaching, depending on the session. So this will be lovely. It'll be a lovely tool for them. I think that it'll help them feel more comfortable and help them grow their skills. So thanks.
Yeah, it's interesting, Michelle, because I agree with you. People ask me for a script all of the time. And oftentimes during my live trainings, I will do a live demonstration and I will watch people writing down my questions. And over the years, I realized, I don't think we can give people a script because there is no script. These questions come up organically in a conversation. But I think we can give people a map. We can give people a process. In fact, I think we owe it to give people a process. And it took Adam and I literally a decade, but eventually we started getting clear on a process because everyone is doing something. It's not something. And when I was learning this approach, I used to ask people, where'd you get that question? And they would be like, I don't know, it just came to me. And I'm like, no, that is not good enough. There has to be something that led to you asking that question. And it turns out that there is, right? Turns out there absolutely is.
Thanks, Michelle. Cecil, I see your hand up.
Nice to be on this side. I have a question. You were saying, people start to meander and wander around when they're kind of following the wrong thing, where they're just grabbing at whatever the last few words that the client said. What do you see as being the most significant factor that determines where you're moving once you've kind of gotten a preferred future and you're somewhere in the middle of the diamond? How do you determine what's the most significant thing that determines where am I going next from here?
I'll take a stab, and then I'm sure Elliott will have something to add. What I would say is it comes down to, then you move on to the description, right? Which type of description tends to be personal preference, right? Elliott just laid out his preferred pathway typically is from the desired outcome to resource talk to preferred future to the end. Evan does that same pathway, but before he ends, he also scales, right? Chris tends to just go desired outcome, preferred future. Harvey stays simply on, most of the time, scales. And so it really, I think that's one of the things that I would say is that we really want to emphasize that this holds on to the co-construction process. And by definition, co-construction means I'm bringing something to the table. And so I'm bringing my personal preference of how to build this conversation. I'm bringing my skills of, I really like doing resource talk, or I really like doing the preferred future. So those are the kinds of questions you're most likely going to get because I am a co-constructor here. You're bringing all of the content about how to answer these questions. And so I think we really also have to hold on to, this is a co-constructed process, and we have some choice in what's happening here. Yeah, Rob. You're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so question for Elliott. So how much do you think connections is important to the process in SF?
I think connection is everything.
Yeah.
Actually. But I think connection is everything. It goes back, Eve and I have had several conversations and really kind of bonded behind this idea that we both believe in the idea that connection is everything. So I think you can't be an effective helper if you're not connected to your client. So I think we have to take a stance that allows the connection that the client has gifted us with to not be broken. So I think connection is everything, and everything that I'm saying is actually trumped by build a connection.
Yeah.
Now, it's funny because I've actually asked clients over the 15 years I've been practicing solution-focused therapy.
Yeah.
Like, why? Why did this make a difference in your life? And the answer is consistently because I felt good when I talked to you. And Adam's going to say something about that in a second. But I remember one time when I first started doing solution-focused, and I'll be honest with you, I was really skeptical when I started doing it. My original training was in CBT, and solution-focused brief therapy is a bit counterintuitive. Like if someone has a problem, I'm supposed to ask them about the outcome. Like that's a bit counterintuitive. And I struggled with it. And I was working in a drug court. So all of the clients I had were using drugs, and their parents were really frustrated with them. And I was doing in-home family therapy. And my boss couldn't figure out why all of my clients loved working with me. I mean, when you do in-home family therapy, I don't know if any of you guys have done this, but most of the time you go to the client's house and you knock on the door and the clients wouldn't let the other therapists in. And I had like a 100% show-up rate. So every time I knocked on my client's door, they would let me in. So one time, and the clients had to come to the office like once a month to see like the psychiatrist or the social worker or whatever. So one time my boss sees one of my clients sitting in the lobby and says, "Excuse me, can I ask you a question?" And they pull my clients aside and said, "What is it about Elliott that you guys like?" And the client didn't say, "Oh, we like the miracle question," or "We like scaling," or "He asked us about exceptions." The client said, "He just believes in you so much that it makes you believe in yourself." And I never forgot that, because the quickest way to connect with someone is to believe in their possibilities. That's the quickest way to connect with someone, is to believe in what they're capable of. So imagine being a mom and your kid is skipping school, using and or selling drugs, and then you tell a therapist, "I want to be a better mom." And every other therapist has said, "Well, I need to teach you how to be a better mom because you stink as a mom, because look at it." And then this other therapist simply says, "Yeah, I love that. Hey, what have you done right as a mom?" And I remember one time I asked this mom that, and she looked at me and she started to weep. And she said, "I haven't done anything right as a mom." And she looked around her house and she was like, "My kids don't behave and they get really poor grades." And at that moment, and her kid was in the room, he was like 13 years old. And at that moment, the child got up, he got a Kleenex, he got a piece of tissue for his mother and handed it to his mother so she could wipe the tears off of her eyes. And I said, "Where did he learn to do that?" And she said, "Do what?" And I said, "Express care." And he said, "He has these moments where he's such a loving child." I said, "Where did he get that?" And she said, "I've always loved on him, even when he's been being difficult." And you could watch her start recognizing that, like, I'm not all bad, right? So imagine you have the choice to like let that therapist in your house or let the therapist who's going to judge your parenting in your house. It's not even close. So Rob, I think that's amazing, because I think connection is like it's everything in solution. Well, not only in solution-focused therapy, connection is everything in the world, right? Connection is like absolutely 100% everything in everything we do.
Yeah.
Like if you want to have a better experience in the world, go get connected with somebody.
Yeah, completely. I'm just really, really interested, because when I first did my stuff with Brief, it was very much just about the questions, and I watched Evan work, I watched Harvey work, watched Chris work. I'm a Chris fan like you are, and Chris definitely brought something totally different to the room. I like the word you use, process, because there's a process, but I think if you don't connect with someone, it's never going to work. If I can think of my own clinical work, the last 20 years, my most successful clients are the ones I've connected with within the first 10 minutes. And I think it's just a fundamentally important thing to connect with someone before you even go into the process, really.
Absolutely.
Personally.
Yeah, Rob,
right.
I'm going to just add one thing, and I think, and connect it back to the diamond, right? If our job is to get a desired outcome and then to get a description of the desired outcome, if we're not truly connected to these people, they're not going to be vulnerable enough, or they're not going to trust us enough to tell us what their real desired outcome is.
Yeah, completely.
And so we're built on a faulty foundation from the very beginning. If we go into the rest of our job without a connection, we've missed what we have to build the rest of the session on.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Elliott, yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Kate, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I'm so enjoying this. Thank you to both of you. It seems to me that a lot of what you're talking about is really the self of the therapist. And I don't think we really talk about that a lot in solution-focused work. What we talk about more are the techniques and that kind of thing. I really appreciate your diamond approach because and your description of how you came up with it. And Adam, I attended your previous session on the microanalysis and really appreciated that too. And even during the course of that, I kept wondering, like, did you have a way of sort of factoring in just the natural differences in how different therapists approach using the model? I mean, I was trained at BFTC way back when with Insoo and Steve and Eve and Elam and the whole team. And, they all did it a little differently. And yet, we're using the same model, obviously, but each having their own unique, in some ways, Elliott, it's how you guys described, the folks at Brief and, each of them having their own way, kind of preferred way of going about it. So anyway, I know I'm rambling. Sorry about that. But
No.
It just seems to me that there's an element of, both who I am as a therapist and my approach to connecting with people. And then there are times in terms of the the questions that certain questions are going to resonate more or less with different clients, and your different questions are going to help move things forward more with one client than another. And so, there's also that ability to adapt. So, but I love your model. I love how you put this together. I think it's wonderful for teaching, and I really appreciate it.
But so thank you very much, Kate. There's something I want to amplify that you said. So to whatever degree I'm good at solution-focused brief therapy, I'm going to tell you the superpower that makes me good at it. And that is, I know who I am. Like, I know myself. And I don't think, and going back to Rob's, like, you can't connect if you don't know who you are. Like, I know who I am. And let me tell you why that matters. When I first learned about solution-focused brief therapy, I read about it in a book. It was one chapter of one book, and it was like 2 pages of that chapter. But I was like, wow, this actually makes sense to me. So I went to my professor, who happens to be presenting at this moment in another Zoom room, named Linda Metcalf. And I said, I'm really interested in this solution-focused stuff because it's the only thing I read that makes sense. Like, all this other stuff doesn't make any sense to me. Not that I think there's anything wrong with it. It was just complicated shit. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. So I said to Linda, do you have any videos of what solution-focused brief therapy looks like in action? And she showed me a video of Insoo. And I will never forget watching Insoo do therapy. And I'm gonna do my Insoo impression of what I saw in this session. So Insoo was working with a family. I'll never forget it. She's working with a family, and the teenager said something. I don't remember what, but the teenager said something like, I followed this rule yesterday, whatever it was. And Insoo went, wow, how did you do that? And I watched Insoo do that, and I understood what she was doing. But I thought to myself, I'm a black dude from inner city Boston. If I go, wow, that's going to sound really inauthentic. Like, I can't do that. Like, I can't. I have to
say you just did it twice.
Yeah, I know. And it looked foolish when I did it both times. If I did that with a client, they would be like, get out. I have to be authentically Elliott. And the reason I have to be authentically Elliott is twofold. Number one, I cannot connect if I'm being anything other than authentic. I told you guys, like, I really genuinely like Rob. The reason I like Rob is he's never been anything other than who he is. So we were at a conference and I'm really new. I think the conference where I first met you, Rob, was in Bath. So I'm really new. And at the end of the conference, everybody wants to go like network and like meet with each other. And we want to meet in the hotel lobby. Rob says to me, I want to go get a beer. Who's coming? And I was like, and that's just who Rob is. He listens to hard rock music. He's like, that's just who that guy is. So it's very easy for me to connect with him because he has exposed himself to me, right? And I knew I was watching Insue and I watched her go, wow. And I was like, I can't do that. So I had a choice. And my choice was to recognize I can't do solution focused because I can't go, wow, or I can find the inner city Black version of amplification. You know what I mean? Because like, that's who I am. That's what I am. So she could do it as an enthusiastic, really positive Asian woman that comes from that culture. But I'm not those things. Well, I hope you guys think I'm pretty positive, but other than I'm not those things. I'm not a short Asian woman. You know, I have to be who I am. And I became infinitely better as a human being when I learned to just be who I am in all areas of life. And that includes a solution-focused psychotherapy session. So I think what you're saying is really, really important. But you've got to find yourself. That's why we think the diamond is so important, because you got to find yourself in the diamond. Like, we're not saying Harvey says ask Scales, ask Scales. Harvey has a very particular personality, right? Harvey is very Harvey. Like, Evan is very Evan. Chris is very, very Chris. You know, like Linda Metcalf is very Linda Metcalf. And Elliott Connie is very Elliott Connie. And I think if you want to be good at something, and especially something that requires a connection, you have to be yourself in the doing of that something. So find yourself in the model, which is what I had to do. So Insue amplifies by going, wow. And Elliott amplifies by, once I hear you do something positive, I will ask you 1,400 questions about it. And that's my way of amplifying. That's how I do it. If you tell me that, like if Adam tells me, you guys don't know this, but Adam just drove, I don't know how many miles, like 1,400 miles total, probably something like that. He took his family on a road trip. How many miles you drive, Adam? I know you calculated it.
Just over 4,000 miles.
4,000. Okay. Adam just drove 4,000 miles. Now, I know Adam and his family well enough to know Adam drove every one of those miles, because Becca doesn't like to drive, and Adam likes Adam doesn't like Becca to do things she doesn't like to do. So if Adam tells me, like, I just drove 4,000 miles in 2.5 weeks, I'm like, Adam, how'd you do that? And I'll say, and what did you notice about yourself when you got tired that kept you going? And you guys also don't know that in the middle of this ride, Adam's van, his air conditioner stopped working. And I'll say, and I will ask Adam, like, what did you do to stay focused? Because I know me, I would have pulled over and I would have like cried on the side of the road until AAA came and gave me a new vehicle. So what did you do? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that's my way of amplifying, is I stay on it forever. But I had to discover, like, that's the Elliott way of amplification. And what we hope this diamond does is it's an invitation to all of you to be yourself and find yourself in the process.
Perfect. Joe, I saw your hand up for a long time and then you put it down. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's been really thought-provoking, because I don't often open my sessions with what are your best votes from our talking, what are your best votes from this work together. I'm more interested in them as people and asking them what is it about this family that tells you it's worth fighting for? And you start a conversation on people's strengths and resources, and then going on to the best hopes. Because I think, I don't know, it's just something that came naturally. It was just, and when we're talking about connection, I think people are fed up with hearing what's wrong with them. That there's got to be someone that says, actually, despite everything that's going on, you're still fighting for each other. What is it about you guys that tells you it's worth fighting for? And it changes the whole feeling in the room. You can feel it. There's an energy. And I don't know if you can teach that. And like you were saying, Elliott and Adam, we're all individuals. We do it in our own way. And sometimes I can be blunt with clients. Sometimes I'm a bit directive. And sometimes I'm in awe of them. I'm just like, wow. And like Elliott was saying, it's like, yeah. And when I asked that question, it was, I'll never forget the family, but it was like, they looked at each other and thought, well, we're going to have a lifelong relationship with each other. I want us to, we're going to know each other for the rest of our lives. I want us to build this thing. So I've stopped asking. I haven't stopped asking the best hopes. I just don't start with it. I just
see, Adam, can you bring up the diamond again? Because I want, Joe just made such a crucial, really important point. Now, if you notice, there are arrows that are multi-directional. So what Joe just said is I start here, I start at resource talk and work backwards. Like, so, and Joe's right, like you change the temperature in the room. And the type of work that you do with parents, and Joe, I know, because I worked with parents primarily for many, many years. If you say to them like, hey, before we get started, I'm just looking around. What is it about your family that makes you fight so hard to get it back on track and let a complete and total stranger into your home to try to get it sorted? It changes everything. Like it immediately makes me feel like you saw something no one else sees. And that's a brilliant, wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So as much I can disagree with Joe and say, no, I still start with the desired outcome and here's why. But Joe also disagrees with me. And he's like, no, but I do this and here's why. And both processes can be found on the diamond. Which is why Adam and I would say, everyone does it right. Just everyone does it with their accent. And Joe does it with a resource talk accent.
Yeah, but I would also say that that's why you need to be really, really clear about where you are in the process, right? You're asking those resource questions first for a reason. And so that makes it purposeful. Sometimes when we've talked to people, they will often say, resource talk is the place where I get lost, because I could ask people about what they're good at for days. But until you connect it to their desired outcome, right? And just asking that question of what is it about this family that's worth fighting for? When you ask that question, I heard in there, there's inherently desired outcome in there, because they're saying if we're willing to fight for this, this must be something we want. And that's really a desired outcome, is what do you want? And so I would say that makes perfect sense, because it's leading you exactly where you need to go in order to have the rest of the conversation. Kate, I think we have 1 minute to come back to you.
Yeah, so one other question. One thing I'm not seeing in your model, and I'm wondering if it's conceptually embedded in one of the circles you've already got, and that is, well, what the original team called compliments, or I know other people called affirmations or affirms. Do you view that as being embedded in some of the other circles, or what's your thinking about that?
We don't give compliments.
That's not entirely true.
That is true.
No, listen to this and then tell me that I'm wrong. So we feel like, again, because this is a co-construction, I want to, let me bring up one thing that we didn't highlight. The closing part here, right? We believe that in closing, you close in a way that maximizes the client's autonomy and agency. And one of the things that we've noticed in the evolution of SFBT is that many people are moving away from overt compliments. I don't know if you were in, oh yeah, you said that you were in my presupposition thing before, right? One of the things that I would say is that compliments are now embedded in presuppositions, right? You heard Elliott just say, I drove 4,000 miles. He said, how did you do that? Right? Embedded in that, instead of him giving me a compliment and saying, you're amazing to drive 4,000 miles, he's given me an opportunity to compliment myself. And I would say that's a much more powerful compliment. So I would say it's embedded in every single one of those circles. And I think it goes back to what Rob said, it's about this connection and the way that we view clients. We ask them questions with the presupposition that they're amazing, and we allow them to give us the answer about why they're amazing. So we allow them to self-compliment instead of overstepping into their agency and complimenting for them.
Is a compliment, on the other side of a compliment is judgment. So even if I say something positive, like, Adam, I think you are nice, on the other side of that is, if I judged you to determine that you're nice, which communicates to my client I'm judging them. And so as a field, we've kind of all moved away from that overt judgment. So now, like Adam said, the compliment is hopefully embedded in each and every one of my questions. As if, like, Rob plays music, and I might say, wow, Rob, where'd you learn how to sing like that? I just kind of embedded compliment his singing, right? Or Cecil plays the piano, and I might say, gosh, Cecil, like, who taught you how to play the piano? Like, embedded in that is a bit of amazement in how Cecil plays the piano, and so on and so on. So that is how we do it these days.
All right, we have to wrap it up because Elliott's got to move on to the next one.
I do. I got to move on and talk about what it's like being a Black solution-focused therapist.
But thank you all. Thanks for being here. Thanks for engaging in this conversation. Thanks for really, really insightful questions. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And click that link and download
That was great, guys.
PDF because you guys have it.
Thanks
for
Rob.
being here, Rob.
Really
I know it's late,
wonderful.
man, but I always like seeing you.
What I took from that was process rather than framework. Brilliant.
Facts.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.